It's a deep left field by Alvarez, and that's going to go in 4 straight games for the second time. And he's homer.
What's up, New York Mets fans? It's your boy CP, and this is the True Mets Talk podcast. It is Friday afternoon. We are just approaching 3 p.m., and we have some major developments to talk about regarding this Pete Alonso situation. Before we talk about it, clearly I dropped a little bit of a video breaking down the latest report from Jim Duquette. As you can see right here on your screen, we're going to be talking about everything relating to the New York Mets and their negotiations and their ongoing negotiations with Pete Alonso. We'll talk about both sides of the coin. What can we expect? And is there a resolution coming soon? Before we fully talk about it, please do spam those like buttons. If you're in the chat, please do comment your thoughts and opinions on this matter. And, to do subscribe to the channel for all your latest Mets happenings and news. And again, this is such an exciting time, even though we don't have the major deals coming across in this MLB free agency. There's still a plethora of free agents out there. In addition to Pete Alonso, you've got Alex Bregman, you've got Jurickson Profar, you've got Anthony Santana. There's still a lot of work left to be done by not only the New York Mets, but also teams around the league. But I just thought it was so interesting as I'm hopping on this live stream, and I got about 30 minutes with you all to break this down. And again, I want to get your thoughts and opinions. So please, if you are a subscriber of this channel, hit that live chat. If you're over on X, come over to the YouTube and subscribe and let me know what your feelings are regarding this latest report from Jim Duquette. Now, if you haven't heard of the latest report and you don't know what's going on, this was kind of a bombshell dropped at 9 a.m. this morning. Probably some of you all were still asleep, maybe. I was up and that came across my screen and I was very shocked. I was very surprised. According to league sources, this is from Jim Duquette, ex-GM of both the Orioles and the New York Mets. He's on MLB Network. He contributes to SNY. According to league sources, Pete Alonso's camp has offered the Mets a 3-year deal with opt-outs. This deal is only available to the New York Mets right now. No deal is known to be close at the moment. And Alonso's agent, Scott Boras, declined comment. This is absolutely insane. And I have on here, it sounds like an ultimatum off. I know it's not the end-all be-all. I know it's not the ultimatum, take it or leave it offer. But it's coming from Alonso and Boras to the Mets instead of vice versa. That is huge. And that indicates to me a whole lot of things that I'll talk about here in just a second regarding Pete Alonso, regarding his status in New York, regarding, his feelings towards the Mets and playing in the city of New York. It tells me a whole bunch of things. But I just want to sort of backtrack as we now know this report, right? To just a couple of days ago, because every single day there seems to be a new update or a new report from somebody different in the MLB journalism world, giving their thought process of what's happening between the New York Mets and Pete Alonso right now. So I just feel the need to backtrack to just a couple of days ago in the report that I also talked about on this channel from what Bob Nightingale was reporting with Scott Boras going around using Prince Fielder's 9-year, $214 million deal as a comparison to what Pete Alonso should be making in this free agency. And everybody saw this and everybody knew that it was ridiculous. Nobody is expecting Pete Alonso to sign a 9-year deal, no matter what age he's at. He's 30 years old, going on 31, even if he was 28. Coming off of the season or the 2 seasons that he's had now back-to-back in 2023 and 2024, nobody's extending him anything north of a 6 or 7-year deal. And he would be lucky to even get that with what he's done in the past 2 seasons. Now, again, I understand the playoff numbers. They were spectacular, right? He caught fire at the right time, and he probably saved himself a lot of money with his playoff performance. That is all fine and good, right? We know that. But at the end of the day, as soon as you saw this report come out from Bob Nightingale, everybody was scratching their heads. We all know that Scott Boras, he asks for the moon as a starting point in negotiations, at the negotiation table for his clients. But 9 years, $214 million, something seemed off with this report. So then you fast forward until the next day, and you get a little bit more of a reliable source and John Heyman in this whole situation. I'll talk about John Heyman here in just a second because he has some more info to chime in on in this latest, as it relates to the latest Jim Duquette report. But as of yesterday, John Heyman was stating, right now we're looking at Alonso wanting at least a 6-year deal. I also made a video about this on the channel. Scroll back on the channel and make sure you go ahead and listen to my thoughts and opinions on Heyman stating that Alonso wants 6 years. Okay, so Alonso wants 6 years. He's not budging in terms of that 3-year deal that either was or wasn't on the table from the New York Mets with opt-outs worth $90 million, $30 million AAV. He wants a long-term deal. Okay, this was yesterday on January 9th. So now we fast forward and get to the point on January 10th at 9 a.m. Now we're hearing that Alonso is shifting his tune. So is Scott Boras, and that they are going to offer the New York Mets a potential deal of a 3-year contract with opt-outs, but with the dollar figure, the AAV and the total contract dollar figure still unknown. And in my short video, it was about 3.5 minutes long, reacting to this morning on the channel, I didn't mention anything about a dollar valuation because you see, as in this tweet, that is missing from this report. We still don't know how this 3-year offer from Alonso and Scott Boras to the Mets is looking contractually and in terms of the total dollar figure. Now, again, this is Scott Boras we're talking about. So I have no doubt in my mind that, again, he's shooting for the moon as a starting point. Okay, listen, our backs are against the wall. This is probably Scott Boras' thought process. Our backs are against the wall. We will go back down to a 3-year deal, just like the Mets want. And the Mets, by the way, they're playing this perfectly. David Stern, Steve Cohen, they're playing this perfectly because now they have gotten Alonso and Boras to come down to their yearly figure at 3 years. That's a check mark right there. That's a win. Now they're fighting the battle with Alonso and Boras for what the AAV is going to be. And if there was any truth a couple of weeks ago about the report that the Mets had a 3-year, $90 million offer on the table to Alonso. Again, it was unconfirmed. We don't know if that actually hit the negotiation table from the New York Mets to Alonso. We could only assume that it did for $30 million AAV. We could probably deduce that this deal right now, if the Mets were to say no to Alonso, it's because the AAV is probably $33 to $34 million. And that's the discrepancy now, and that's what needs to be figured out. There are a lot of predictions out there on what this deal could look like when it's all said and done. Could it get back down to the 3 years, $90 million? Could it be 3 years, $100 million? For just over $33 million a year. That sounds ridiculous, but again, we've seen Scott Boras clients take shorter-term deals for a higher AAV in off-seasons past, particularly last off-season in a couple of pitching clients that Scott Boras had under his belt. So what is the AAV going to look like if both sides come to an agreement? And I will say, this is the start of my optimism. And actually, quite frankly, I've been optimistic that a deal between Alonso and the Mets gets done. I've always been optimistic, and it always has made the most sense fit-wise for what the Mets need right now and in the short term. And this is telling me that a deal is on the horizon. I will say that. Now, again, this is pure speculation on my part. There's no deal imminent. Andy Martino has been adamant that things could move quickly, but right now there's nothing extensive between these two parties in terms of, signifying a deal being close. But if I had to guess, this deal gets done by the end of the weekend. There's no way that this type of report gets out from Jim Duquette and there's not something substantially there in terms of the mindset of Alonso and Boris, and knowing that the market is at an all-time low for them and that their backs are against the wall in a deal that they're going to take and they're going to have to take. Now, John Heyman also, again, has, took to Twitter, provided some updates, went on his live streams as well and talked about there is talks between the two sides, but there's still a lot that needs to get done to come to a common ground. But this is the same John Heyman that just told us yesterday that Alonso's going to want at least a 6-year deal. So who do we believe here? And I will say, Mets fans, let's not forget, the guy that everybody listens to the most when it comes to the most reliable reporting, not only for the New York Mets, but also around the league, is Jeff Passan. Jeff Passan, just over a week ago, stated himself, the most likely scenario for Alonso, whether they accept that fate or not right now, is going to be a short-term deal, whether it's 3 or 4 years, with a lot of opt-outs in between. And that's what Jeff Passan himself even said. Let's not forget that. Let's not forget that. Mr. Delight, appreciate you being here on this live stream. I appreciate it. Listen, guys, ladies and gentlemen, I know it's early. I know it's a Friday. TGIF. Some people may still be at work. Some people may be commuting on the way back from work, but please do spam those like buttons on this stream. Again, I'll be here for the next probably 20 minutes, maybe 15, talking about this situation, because this just seems like fate at this point that the Mets and Alonso are going to work this out. This is the best question of them all from Mr. Delight. How much money a year is this potential deal going to be? That was not reported. But again, if we're talking about, and this is a big if the Mets are at $30 million, let's just say Scott Boras and Pete Alonso are at 33, right? 33.3 if you want to say 3 years for $100 million. That's not a big gap. That's not a big gap. Now, I understand that Scott Boras, again, could be asking for 35 plus. This is Scott Boras at the end of the day. He exaggerates at the starting point. I don't think that Scott Boras and Pete Alonso want to drag this out any further than it already has. I understand that there are a lot of other free agents that other teams could go after, including the New York Mets. They've been tied to Alex Bregman to some capacity. JP Morosi was just talking about Anthony Santander as it relates to the New York Mets if they can't get a Pete Alonso deal done. I think Pete Alonso himself understands that he needs the New York Mets. And I'm going to be careful, and I actually just, thought this through. I think everybody, at least most people, can agree on this. I truly do believe that Pete Alonso needs the New York Mets more than the Mets need Pete Alonso. That's not a jab at Pete Alonso. And hopefully my audio is working here. So if you guys can't hear me, please let me know. But I think my audio is working. Hopefully my mic is working. But Pete Alonso needs the New York Mets more than the Mets need Pete Alonso. It's a fact. It's a fact. I have no doubt in my mind that Pete Alonso enjoys being a New York Met. I have no doubt in my mind that Pete Alonso wants to continue to play in New York. No doubt in my mind. And that's what us Mets fans should also be looking for in players. Guys that want to come into New York and embrace being a New York Met. And all the pressure, or maybe lack thereof in recent years, but now more so than ever, now that Juan Soto's on board, embracing that pressure, wanting to bring a championship back to Queens. I have no doubt in my mind that Pete Alonso, that's part of his thought process here. But Pete Alonso, if we're talking about a 3-year deal with opt-outs in between, this is not the end-all be-all for Pete Alonso. He wants to go back onto that free agent market, and he is still adamant about getting a long-term deal. Whether it's a 3-year deal with an opt-out after the first and the second year, or maybe it's an opt-out after every single year, whether he hits the market at age 31 or 32, he's still after that long-term deal. And he can still get it. This is kind of, if this is true, and I have no reason to believe that this report from Jim Duquette is not true, right? This leaked from somewhere. Probably wasn't from the New York Mets. Scott Boras declined comment. But Pete Alonso, if he takes this 3-year deal, that's not the end-all be-all. He's still pursuing and he's still chasing a long-term deal and getting back onto that free agent market, presumably when he has a better regular season in 2025 than he did in 2024. And even with Vlad Guerrero Jr. hitting the market next offseason, he can still get that, even if he's in the same free agent class as Vlad Guerrero. Now, on the flip side of things, this is very advantageous for the Mets because let's say Pete Alonso does have a spectacular 2025 regular season and he opts out. Well, if the Mets are thinking about this from a Vlad Guerrero Jr. standpoint as it is, they still have free reign to go out there and negotiate with Vlad and just tell Pete Alonso bye-bye. We've moved on to bigger and better things. A lot can happen in a season, and a lot can happen in a year. And maybe Pete Alonso does have a spectacular performance, and he wins back part of the fan base that has given up on him. Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. But this deal right now provides the Mets so much flexibility because they can still pursue Vlad Guerrero Jr. at the end of the day if that's their end goal. If we don't know. Nobody knows anything, clearly. But if we're speculating that that is the reason why they are only willing to go a short-term deal with Pete Alonso in the first place, because they have their eyes set on Vlad Jr. and they don't want to make the move right now in this offseason because he would be essentially a 1-year rental, this makes complete sense. Kendrick, absolutely 100%. The ball is definitely in David Stearns' corner right now. And this is, like, don't get it twisted. The Mets hold all the leverage here. There is a reason why this deal is on the table to the Mets and to the Mets only. Because there's no other team out there that has a long-term offer, if any offer at all, on the table for Pete Alonso. Scott Boras knows that. Pete Alonso knows that. David Stearns knows that. So when I take a look at these negotiations between these two parties, how could you say the Mets haven't played this perfectly, ladies and gentlemen? So again, we're talking about, as I mentioned in my recent, or actually my video yesterday, the Mets are being run by Steve Cohen and David Stearns, known Mets fans growing up. Steve Cohen has shown a willingness to overpay for certain impending free agents, aka Brandon Nimmo, as of most recent. If they really wanted Pete Alonso in a long-term deal, they would have done it already. They would have went the extra mile. And if it wasn't a big indication already, with the Yankees having a golden opportunity to pursue Pete Alonso on a long-term deal after losing out on Juan Soto to the Mets, they didn't do it. The Nationals, there was a lot of speculation that the Nationals, an up-and-coming team, could be in on Pete Alonso. They didn't go after him. The Houston Astros, and losing, or I guess trading Kyle Tucker, and potentially on the brink of losing Alex Bregman to free agency, they could have waited and they could have offered a long-term deal, but they went the Christian Walker route. Trust me, Boras and Pete Alonso know what it is. They know what it is. And when we're talking about this report from Jim Duquette, this is the ultimate sign that this is almost endgame for the New York Mets. They've already got this situation and this party down in terms of the years. Now they just have to get them down in the AAV, which is essentially probably what Jon Heyman is talking about with that next step in the gap between these two parties, being Pete Alonso and the New York Mets. Shout out to the chat. Appreciate you all always being here and supporting the channel. Again, if you are new and you're viewing this, make sure to tap on that subscribe button. I haven't done a standalone live stream like this in quite some time. I've been doing the Mets Hot Stove Lives with Rob. I've been doing a lot of pre-recorded episodes, but it's really been a minute since I actually got to be on a live stream with you all right here on the True Mets Talk podcast live stream. So I appreciate it. Subscribe if you enjoy the content, if you enjoy the conversation. Trying to keep things as interactive on the channel as possible with the lack of news. It's very hard. It seems like there's always something coming out, but then nothing at the same time. So hopefully you all are enjoying the content. Please smash those thumbs up buttons. In-season content, off-season content, you'll get that right here on the True Mets Talk podcast. Let me shout out the chat here a little bit more. Steven saying what's up to everybody. What's up, Steven? Marcus is agreeing. TGIF. Thank goodness it is Friday. Carlos is saying exactly. This is Alonso literally begging the Mets to overpay for him. Nostalgic. Or when Cohen is unwilling to pay the $450 that Vlad wants. Do we really think that if they identify Vlad Guerrero Jr. as a guy that they want, that they're not going to pay that $450 million? I think they would. I think they would. I think that if they pre-identify any single player on the market that they need in this organization, they're going to go above and beyond. They did it for Juan Soto. They did it for Brandon Nimmo. There was a while where we were speculating what the resolution to the Francisco Lindor situation was going to be. If he was going to get a contract extension before entering his final year of that deal when they traded for him. And guess what? They wanted Francisco Lindor, and they went above and beyond. I believe at that time it was $1 million more than the Fernando Tatis deal. And they did it. So, shout out to the chat. Carlos Kendrick, Nostalgic, Mr. Delight. Appreciate you with the update on the audio. I never know with this microphone, man. I never know. But yeah, listen. This is kind of a revelation for me because we've been waiting and waiting and waiting on Pete Alonso. You know, Jon Heyman is also changing his tune up a little bit. Andy Martino is chiming in as it relates to this report right here. Andy Martino, can we take a minute to just assess the way that Andy Martino reports about the New York Mets? I mean, come on. It just seems like he has nothing good to say about the Mets. And I know that's already been known. I get it. But come on. Space is saying sign him up now. 3 years. See, if I had a perfect resolution to this. So let's just take a second because this is a really good comment by Space Ghost right here. You know, you've got 3 years. You start off at 3 for $90. Pete Alonso wants a long-term deal. Okay, we're going to wait for another couple weeks. Pete Alonso's waiting. He's waiting. He's waiting. No other offers around the league are coming at his footsteps. Okay, let's match in years what the Mets want to do here, but let's come at them with a higher and more aggressive AAV. So let's just say, for the sake of argument, Mets are at 30 and Alonso's at 35, and Boris is asking for 35. That's probably a little bit more than $100 million over 3 years. There's still going to need to be some compromise here. And I'm not saying the Mets are going to do it. 3 years for $90 million could have been their best offer for all we know. Not a penny more for Pete Alonso, or else we're fine with going down the Vientos at first base route. But I'm inclined to believe if they've already won the battle of getting Scott Boras and Pete Alonso down and talking them off of that ledge of 6 or 7 years, if the discrepancy between these offers is $1 or $2 million, what is that to Steve Cohen? And I understand it's about the principle at that point. I get it, because I'm the first one to say the Mets shouldn't overpay for anybody just for the sake of overpaying for anybody. But at the end of the day, I don't think that they are going to, if what is missing here between these two sides is $1 or $2 million AAV, I don't think that's going to be a big holdup. Again, pure speculation. I think by the end of this weekend, there's a good chance that this gets resolved. So this is the latest report. Carlos is stating, if Christian Walker got paid $20 million AAV and Teoscar Hernandez, a much better hitter run producer than Alonso is, get paid $22 million, why in the world would the Mets pay anything above that for Alonso? Well, neither of those guys are on the market for the Mets to pursue at this point. I mean, they still have Bregman, they still have Santander as fallback options. But again, when you're talking about strictly first baseman and filling that void. And by the way, the secondary piece to this, and it could help this out, is that now that other teams get a hold of the news that Pete Alonso is willing, whether it's with the Mets strictly or opening up that discussion to other teams around the league, if other teams get wind of that, maybe they approach Scott Boras and Pete Alonso. Maybe if you're the San Francisco Giants, and I think that this is the perfect team, if there are any other teams involved, which John Heyman is stating that there are, maybe the Giants come in and say, hey, listen, we'll give you the 3 years. We'll give you the $100 million if the Mets aren't willing to do so. Come to San Francisco. Angels could do the same thing. Again, it's a different ballgame now that we're talking about Alonso actually being willing, and now that we have a public report of Alonso being willing to go down to that 3 years and that short-term deal outlook. And I don't think Mr. Delight, I don't think it only has something to do with him being homegrown. I understand that that's sentimental to a lot of Mets fans. I also understand that David Wright also just talked about that and how cool it would be to see Pete Alonso, a homegrown talent, remain in the Mets uniform for his entire career. I don't put too much stock into that, and I don't think the Mets are putting too much stock into that into their negotiations. Quite simple. At the end of the day, you have to realize what Pete Alonso is. At this point, in a good year, he'll get you 35 to 40 home runs. In a great year, he'll get you 45 to 50. Like, that is something you want in the middle of your lineup. And I understand that there's a lot of other, problems surrounding Pete Alonso. You talk about the year of 2023 where, the clutch statistics weren't adding up. 2024, same thing. But there's something more to be had. And I've made this prediction already. I understand that he struggled over the past 2 years. I understand that. But if he's willing to take that opt-out for the 3 years, he's going to bet on himself. This is Pete Alonso. Make no mistake about it. This is Pete Alonso betting on himself. He knows, again, as I just stated a couple of minutes ago, he knows he has the opportunity to go back onto the market, whether it's with Vlad Jr. next year or maybe the year after, and he knows that there is going to be a long-term deal waiting for him when it's all said and done. And betting on yourself doesn't just mean it has to be a straight-up one-year deal. I know I've talked about that as a potential option for Pete Alonso a couple weeks ago. That would be the perfect scenario for the New York Mets if Pete Alonso was just willing to take that prove-it-year deal, straight up one-year deal, and call it a day. Clearly, there's going to need to be some security for Alonso's camp just in case he falls flat on his face in the regular season, just like he did in 2024. So, I'm trying to look at it from both sides, but when I look at this report, this is a clear win for the New York Mets. Again, they've been in a stare down. They've been at a stalemate with Pete Alonso for quite some time. There could have been points already where they could have just given in. They could have seen, Goldschmidt, a veteran rental, off the market and panicked. They could have seen the alternative in Christian Walker. And it seems like they were never in on Christian Walker, but they could have seen him off the board and panicked. There's no sense of panic from the New York Mets right now, nor should they be, or should there be, excuse me. They're in the driver's seat. They're in the driver's seat. But as I opened up this live stream, I'm not sure if everybody was tuning in with me. It's just so wild to see the progression. And this is such a poorly executed, process from Scott Boras as he's handled this Pete Alonso situation. Scott Boras, listen, the guy knows what he's doing on many of occasions. It was pretty easy for him to secure a mega deal for Juan Soto, and he played it perfectly. Again, it's the type of client that you're representing, and then also the supply and demand factor of that player and of that position. But to go from this report, again, this could not be true. This could be just Bob Nightingale throwing something out there, seeing what sticks. But it's just funny as it pertains to us talking about the multiple reports and the levels of them, going from this quote right here to then John Heyman saying himself yesterday he wants a 6-year deal. And oh, by the way, you know what? Forget about the 6-year deal. We're sorry. We'll take a 3-year deal. Will you meet us there with the AAV? It's just, it's so funny to me. So we'll see how this plays out. Again, I have the live chat poll up and running right now. Is Pete Alonso going to sign with the Mets by the end of the weekend? Again, everything about this smells like he's going to be back in the Mets uniform. And if it is on a 3-year deal with opt-outs in between, again, the Mets are in the driver's seat because it provides them the most flexibility. It also provides Alonso the most security and also flexibility to go back onto the market. I think that's very clear, very obvious. It's a very good deal for both sides of this negotiation. Yeah, this is what, and I saw the John Heyman article. He said that there's not a shred of truth to that report. I actually saw that. But it was just funny that Bob Nightingale actually ran with that and decided to put that out, is what my sentiment is. So, listen, that's going to do it for me. John is here, really want to blow the game away. Take the $18 million per year, 3 years of Yoshida to get Tristan Casas, and boom, fill first in DH for $18 million a year. Hey, I think you're undervaluing Tristan Casas. If this is, and I've explored this, and Andy Martino has also put a statement out stating that, it's not impossible, it's not probable, but it's not impossible that there is some interest with the Mets and Tristan Casas. With this latest report from Jim Duquette, do I think that is almost at a 0% chance? Yes. But I'm not sure if the Red Sox are going to just get rid of Tristan Casas just for the sake of freeing up that $18 million per year of Yoshida. I think that Tristan Casas has a lot more value to them, particularly as it pertains to the Red Sox pitching outlook and them wanting more pitching, if that makes sense. I understand it. I understand the thought process of where you're going down, that route. But I think you're undervaluing Tristan Casas just a little bit. So I appreciate everyone being here. Again, this is a very short live stream. Check out all the videos on the channel. Please do smash that thumbs up button. Subscribe to the channel. We'll see how this Pete Alonso situation resolves itself. I'm fully expecting Pete Alonso to be a New York Met by weekend's end, but maybe it drags out again. The primary thing to take home right now is that The Mets and Pete Alonso are in agreement upon the years and the opt-outs. The only thing that's standing in the way of Pete Alonso being the Mets first baseman in 2025 on opening day is how much money per year is Pete Alonso going to be making? Is it going to be 30? Is it going to be 33? Somewhere in between? We'll see how it all plays out. Again, keep an eye out. You'll never know when I do an impromptu live stream just as this one. I appreciate it. Hopefully everybody enjoys the rest of their weekend. It's your boy CP. I'm out. Let's go Mets. Peace.